go. All right, come on in. We're going to get started in about a minute here. Nice to see some names I recognize in the attendees list. Shout out to some Rights alums and some future Rights alums. I see you coming in here. It's good stuff. All righty. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Penn State Berks LionSide Chats. My name is Dawn Pfeiffer Wrights, and I'm one of 3 LionSide Chat moderators. I work alongside my colleague, Dr. Ryan Hassler, who you'll hear from shortly, and also Sonia De Cueto from our Learning Center. So come on in and welcome to our campus. We're really glad you can join us today for our final We Are session for the semester. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. You can ask questions throughout our presentation utilizing the Q&A feature, and we will save all the questions till the end of our session. We will not be utilizing the raise hand feature, and our chat has been disabled. And finally, we are recording today's session, and this will be available on the LionSide Chat website archive page and within a week of today. So please make sure you're sharing this with all of your friends that weren't able to attend. So I am really excited to introduce my colleague and friend, Dr. Ryan Hassler, Associate Teaching Professor of Mathematics. And Ryan's talk today is going to be about how to prepare and what to think about and information about final exams. And maybe if we're lucky, there might be some tips that I share during the Q&A from my perspective as well. So Ryan, I'm going to stop the share if you want to up yours there, put yours up.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much. Let's see if this is up. There we go. It's showtime, right? That's for you, Dawn.
All right, it's showtime. Love it.
All right.
Thank
you so much. All right, folks. So yeah, as Dawn introduced me here, we're going to be talking about studying for final exams and what that looks like. And I know for some of you, well, probably many of you, you're first semester students, so maybe this is the first go around for final exams at the college level. And I know with COVID over the last year, 2 years or so, maybe even your high schools, if you were in high school or whatever that looked like, maybe they had canceled final exams. So maybe you aren't really used to taking final exams or don't know necessarily what to expect. So please, 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 I mean, I'm going to be giving you content and talking about what this looks like here on our campus and, you know, as a Penn State student, but throw questions into the Q&A. We're here, like I said, I'm going to do this from a math perspective, but there's going to be lots of stuff here that's more general knowledge, not just math. But Dawn is here as well. So when I'm done going through these slides, we can kind of help you answer any questions, whether it's, you know, from a math science perspective or, you know, the humanities or any other perspective. Dawn could definitely shed some light on that as well. So studying final exams, it's showtime. So first and foremost, there are 15 weeks in the semester, and week 16, the week after the last week of classes. So we are currently Monday of week 15 right now today. So final exams start on Monday, December 13th. There are some places that have study days, some other universities. We don't have that here at Penn State. So final exams will start a week from today, Monday, December 13th, and they run through all of next week, Friday, December 17th, but probably many of you, I don't know, I don't think there's very many finals that actually happen on Friday. So it'll be much heavier first couple of days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. If you haven't done so already, maybe your professors have talked to you about when your test is, but if you go into LionPath, you can get a schedule, your final exam schedule. So if you log into LionPath, you will click on final exam schedule, and you will see this. Of course, it'll look a little bit different. I just copy and pasted my exam schedule as a professor. So there are some of my classes that I don't actually give a final exam for. Maybe they're an asynchronous class, or there's a written component and not you know, a paper. But here are my final exams. So as you can see, when you click on your final exam schedule, if you have a scheduled final exam for your classes, it will show up here with your class title, the class you're in, the date of the exam and the time, along with the room number. This is super important, as we will see on the next slide as I talk about this. Your final exams, if this is your first go around, your final exams are not necessarily going to, probably will not follow your regular class schedule. You could have class at 10 o'clock, but your final exams on at 8 o'clock. You could have class in the afternoon and your final exams, later at night. So you must make sure you are looking at your exam schedule, because number one, it might not be on the same day and time. It also most likely sometimes is not even in the same room. So you need to be prepared, because you don't want to frantically, show up to a room and the test isn't there and you don't know where to go. So on LionPath, you can get your entire schedule. Things I just mentioned, number one, most likely your exam schedule does not look like your class schedule. We do that because we want to give everybody the same exam at the same time. We only have a certain amount of classroom space here on campus. So we do our best to make sure that you have no duplicates, but from time to time, that might actually happen. So you really do want to double check that you don't have two final exams at the same time. You could. If that happens, of course, you have to talk to your professors. It's on you as the student to make sure that you get one of those changed to have a makeup type of time period. And we could talk a little bit more about that in a second, but your exam might not be in your regular classroom, or if it is a synchronous online class, there might be a different Zoom link if you're doing it that way. Check. Make sure you know where to go and when, because like I said, the last thing you want to do is have to take a 0 for a final exam when you've worked all this semester, work very hard for 15 weeks. And because of miscommunication, you show up at a wrong place at a wrong time. So it's important, if this is your first go around, to make sure you have laid out in your calendar when your exams are in what rooms. So I just also mentioned they could be a different room, totally different building maybe. So you definitely need to check that. And the final exams are typically 1 hour and 50 minutes long. Even if you have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday 50-minute class, where you typically are taking an exam for 50 minutes in a class, the final exam schedule is on the 2 hour or 1 hour 50-minute schedule. So you'll have one that starts at 8, you could have one that starts at 10, one that starts at 12. And so I always put here, show up early to ensure there's no issues. When I give my exams, I have multiple sections and they're all taking it at the same place at the same time. So if you're showing up 2-3 minutes late to class, I probably already gave out the final exam, or I'm having to distribute my exam to 100 students. So if you are showing up 5-10 minutes early and you're in your seat ready to go, you will make sure you will have the exam in hand when that the time starts. So make sure there's no issues. You're showing up at the right time. But your schedule should be, the exam should be scheduled for 1 hour and 50 minutes. All right, let's talk about what I had mentioned before. 2 exams at the same time. It can happen. It happens often, and we can't possibly avoid all conflicts. So that ownership of having to make sure that you are taking both exams lies on you as the student. So if you do have 2 exams at the same time, you must make sure you speak to the professors. We as instructors have to allow you to make one of those up at a different time. I also want to point out this here to you. This is the policy of final exams, that if you have 3 or more consecutive periods in one calendar day, so you're taking 3 exams back to back to back, you actually do not have to do that. The policy is that I, as an instructor professor, must allow you to reschedule one of those for a different day. So really, you should only have to be taking 2 back-to-back exams. So if that's the case, you're more than welcome to take 3 tests on Monday if you have 3 scheduled, but you would want to speak to your professors, and you want to do that now if you haven't already. Don't wait until next week and send an email an hour before the test. Again, if there's questions on any of this stuff, even if you're not quite so sure how to ask or whatnot, throw it into the Q&A as I'm going through this, and then Don and I can come back and answer and talk more about any of these things if you just have any specific questions or general questions. All right, so that's multiple exams at the same time. Let's move now into a little bit of how to study. So that's kind of the general idea of what final exams look like here. How to study. Now, again, I'm going to go at this from a math perspective, but that doesn't necessarily mean the stuff I'm telling you is not applicable for other classes. And, you know, every class is going to be different. But here's a question I have up here, and I don't have a poll set up because we're just in the webinar, but what do you think is the most successful, what is the most important, what do I got here, factor in successful learning? So what does the research show? The intention and desire to learn. So what I mean by that is, hey, I really want to do well. So if I, you know, really want to do well, I will. Paying close attention to the material you study. So, you know, being very careful with actually studying the little details. How much time you spend studying. Well, that seems like, you know, the more time you spend, probably the better you'll do. Learning in a way that matches your own learning style. I hear this a lot. Oh, well, I'm a visual person, or I listen best as a to learn. All of those things, yeah, they're important. But really what the research shows, and I will comment real briefly here on it and show you a couple of things. What really matters the most is not your desire to learn, not how much time you spend, but what you're actually doing as you're studying, how you are approaching that. Not the time you're spending, not the will to do it, but what you're actually engaged in thought-wise as you're studying. And so, you know, maybe you've heard the think smarter, not harder type of thing, or work smarter, not harder. Research backs that up across many disciplines for preparing for, you know, large exams like we're talking about here. So here was sort of the groundbreaking, and I don't want to probably really know the research, but here's the groundbreaking research that showed this. And, you know, we're talking back in the late 1960s here. But what these researchers real briefly did was they gave people a list of words, and they said, here, learn the words. And they gave two different directions. In one case, they said, hey, just look at the words. And you can see down here, it says, check if the letter E is in the words. So you're just looking through the words. This is very superficial. This is very shallow, dare I say the word, memorization. This is where you're just trying to take facts in and remember them and really surface level surface level memorize something. Versus they gave the same list of words to other people, and they didn't say, hey, just look to see if they had the letter E. They said, no, I want you to take those 25 words or 30 words, and I want to know how those words, what do they mean to you? What's the feeling of pleasantness? So is it a very, you know, it's a good word or a bad word? Does that make you feel very good or very bad? And rating what it means to you, as opposed to just superficial, shallow checking something. And so this is the deep level of processing. And as you can see, in terms of the grades on the exam, 40% of people recalled the words and performed at the level that they needed to, versus you're pushing almost 70%. And this study has been done over and over and over again with various, you know, disciplines. What you're thinking about, not just checking and superficial memorizing, the shallow level, what you're thinking about, if you're thinking how the word relates to you or how this stuff is connected, the deep level of processing is the way to, you know, increase your performance on exams. So we're going to go a little bit into that deep level of processing. So let me compare these. Shallow level, memorization. If you're making flashcards, I'm not saying flashcards are bad. I'm not saying there's not classes where you need to know dates, maybe history classes, maybe other social science, whatever. There might be some things, formulas, some of your math professors might say, hey, you have to memorize this. I'm not saying that that's bad, but it's a shallow level of comprehension. And so things to try to avoid if you want to take yourself to the next level of getting ready for finals, don't just use flashcards and memorize. Don't just open up your book and reread your notes. Okay, even if you're super motivated to learn and spend a lot of time doing this, you're working way harder than what you have to, and you're not working very smart. Okay, versus a deep level would include more subjective meaning, the why. Now, in mathematics, some things aren't necessarily subjective, right? But the why. Why is this topic attached to this? Making connections across and within concepts. Well, if this is a quadratic, Why am I going to do factoring versus why would I do quadratic formula? Trying to make it more personal, connecting it to prior knowledge. There's a much more deep level of processing, understanding, as opposed to the shallow level. And like I said, some of that shallow stuff, we all do it. I've done it for various classes across, my background. But if you want to try to go to that next level and make the best of the time you're going to spend preparing, let's see if we can dig into this deeper level of understanding. So if I play on that word deep, here are 4 things that I came up with to try to get you, what's this, a mnemonic device, right? The word deep, to try to tell you, okay, you're telling me I got to do better. I got to do deep level, not just memorizing. Well, what does that mean? How do I do it? So I'm going to present it here to you, and then I'm going to show you. I know you're all maybe not, math people, but see if you could take this model and apply it to different, disciplines. So first, distinctiveness. How is the concept that you're working on learning different than other concepts? Is it different? How is this thing different than this? What makes a linear equation linear versus a quadratic equation quadratic? Okay, so how is the topic that you're trying to prepare for distinct? Elaborate. How does this concept relate to other concepts? So the E in deep, the first E I'm putting here as elaboration, right? Don't just, say, okay, I need to learn this, I need to learn this, I need to learn this. Especially in math and science classes, you're learning something for the purpose of connecting it to something else. So elaborate on it as opposed to just looking at the topic in isolation. Expectations. Know what you're expected to use and know how you're expected to use that. So if I'm going to ask you to use the quadratic formula versus another class, I might ask them to prove the quadratic formula, the expectations of me as a professor for you as a student are totally different. And the only way you're going to know that is either you're going to class, you're asking those questions, but you need to know what you're expected to actually perform on. So distinctiveness, elaboration, expectations, and then the last one I just call personal. What the heck does this stuff mean? How can I relate that to stuff that I've done prior to my personal experience? I mean, I don't know how much time and thought you all put into the classes you're taking and why they're connected to the discipline. I was a high school math teacher for several years, and the dreaded question was, when am I ever going to use this? And that's the worst question to ask a math teacher at the high school level. But at the college level, I want you to ask that, right? If you don't know why you're in the class that you're in because you want to be an accountant or you want to be an engineer or you want to go into criminal justice, right? You should be able to see those connections, and the more you can relate it to your discipline and how it's going to benefit you, even though you might not be thinking it's going to, making those personal connections to your learned experiences can really help you go down that deep level. So again, try to pick a math concept that's pretty basic. I'm going to talk about the idea of slope. So there you can see it going down the deep hole there, but distinctiveness, elaboration, expectation, personal. So it's a pretty basic math concept for a college level class. So even if you're in calculus, I'm assuming you would know this. If you're in math 21 or 22, this topic should also be okay. But see if as I'm going through this, yes, I'm using a math topic, but I'm sure you can think about how you could apply this to a different discipline. So if I'm talking about distinctness, right? The definition of a slope. So maybe we surface level, we just need a definition, a constant rate of change. If you don't know what a slope is, how are you going to be able to, if you don't know the definition and how to apply to what it is, how are you going to apply it? So in terms of this, distinctiveness, my first example here, this is an example of a slope. If I just asked you to do a pattern here, I think most of you could probably fill in a 4 here, and you'd probably fill in a 4 here. How do I know those are both 4s? Well, that's the definition of a slope. Constant rate of change. I'm going up 1 each time. As x goes up 1, the y is going up 1. That is slope. Down here, you probably can help me fill in these missing numbers. If you're not sure, that's okay, but this is a 16 and this is a 49. This is not slope. This is a different pattern. My pattern here is that this is the number 1 squared, 2 times 2, 3 times 3, 4 times 4, 5. This is not slope. So distinctiveness. What is slope versus what is something that is not slope? Maybe you do a Venn diagram where on one side you have something, on the other side you have the other stuff. Right? Somehow trying to understand what the topic is and what the topic is not. That's distinctiveness. Elaboration. So are you going to, just be able to, in math, I like this in terms of math because I always talk about there's 3 ways to learn math. Numerically, which is this, here's just the numbers. Algebraically, which is like the equation, and then graphically. Anytime I'm teaching math, I try to do it as algebraically, numerical, and graphical. And so elaborate. Don't just take the problem that you were tested on or the example I did in class. Elaborate on that. How does that connect to the graphical approach? How does that connect to this topic? All right, because that's when you're going to start to make those connections and go to that deeper level of processing. So there's what you can see in terms of slope. I'm not just doing it numerically. I'm saying, okay, what's the equation? What does that look like on a graph? And again, throw some questions in here if you want. Probably the most important thing is expectations. You better, if you come into my class, you better know how I'm going to assess you on my final. How am I going to, as a professor, assess your knowledge of slope? Is it going to be very, very surface level where I'm just simply going to give you 2 equations and you plug those into the formula and boom, there's your answer? Is that what I'm going to do? How do you know if that's what I'm going to do? I've either given you a practice test, you're coming to class, you're asking, you're looking at the review I've given you, okay? Or the next question right below here is exactly the same question, but it's in a word problem. I'm asking you to apply your knowledge of slope. You're still getting the slope. You're trying to find not just here's 2 points that don't mean anything. Here's a word problem about building a wheelchair ramp and using your knowledge of math to get me the dimensions of what would need to be built here. Okay, so if you don't know what to expect, you could prepare this way and you get this question, you're going to blank and not know what to do because you haven't prepared that way because you weren't expecting that to be on the test. So expectations are huge. All right. And then the last one, well, there, still expectations. Multiple choice. Maybe it's going to be a multiple choice test versus a free response. Maybe you have to graph the slope. Okay, so there's so many different ways I could ask you that topic. The last one is personal. How can you relate this to anything? I got a bunch of pictures here. If you're a skier, skiing downhill, that's a slope. If you're, have a cell phone, you pay per minute or per hour, how much you go up. Here's more engineering design. I don't know. I might be dating myself now, but over here on the right, if you've ever watched The Price is Right, this is your little guy who's the mountain climber. For every $1 that the person goes over in their estimate, he goes up 1 little thing. And so that's slope. So there's so many different ways that you can hopefully apply it to something that you have done in the past or something that you have that's of interest to you. And so that's just one model that I would suggest that you might want to apply as you are starting to think about the topics that you're going to be assessed on. Long story short, I just gave you that. Not going to work for everybody. I can't say, here, this is it, do your best and use this model. One size doesn't fit all in this case. You have to figure out what works for you. Okay, coming to the Learning Center, talking to me, thinking about this, working in groups, being open about how you're preparing. This is for many of you, probably there's mostly first-year students here. For many of you, this might be your first shot at these final exams. After final exams, if they don't end the way you wanted it, if you didn't do as well as you would have liked, think about next semester doing something to change that. All right, think about how you prepared, how you're going to prepare differently. You have to start thinking about how you're going to think. That's called metacognition, right? And the more that you think about how you're preparing and how you're, doing, the better you're going to end up doing. So I don't want to claim that this works for everybody, but those are some suggestions from myself. All right, I don't see any questions, so throw something in there if you have something. We're going to do some chatting here at the end. But what to study? How do I know what to study for the final? So let's just real briefly, big overall idea. You should definitely, if you don't know yet, you need to ask your instructor or go back to your syllabus to figure out if your final exams are comprehensive or not comprehensive. So a non-comprehensive exam does not cover the entire material. Cumulative or non-cumulative, same word, comprehensive. So non-comprehensive might just be the last 2 chapters in the book or the last 2 weeks of class. Versus a comprehensive final covers all information from day 1 of the class. Most of your math exams are going to be comprehensive. Not everyone, but most of them here on campus are. I'm sure different disciplines are different, but you need to know, because do you need to prepare 15 weeks of material, or is it just the last 2 or 3? All right, so, and if you don't know, you got to ask, is it going to be multiple choice? Are you going to have to write an essay? Short answer. That goes back to expectations as well. Many of your faculty members hopefully are going to be talking to you about what's on the test. But if they are not, go to office hours, stay after class, go before class. Communication. If they are not talking about the final, you start the conversation, okay? Because you need to know what's on the final and how to prepare. So if you are 23 chapters behind in reading for a class because it's a cumulative test, chances are you're not going to spend time, or you won't have time to spend the night before reading 23 chapters. So first off, that's a whole nother issue that day 1 of next semester, you'll be getting into the Learning Center, and we can put you on a path. Sonia in the Learning Center and I can help you prepare time management things. But if you're 23 chapters behind and you're reading for a class and it's a cumulative test, you got some issues. And the issues aren't going to get solved between now and the time you take your exam. So couple things, if that is you, focus on big concepts from prior exams. I wouldn't try to go read 23 chapters. That's going to take me hours and hours to do. I'd be pulling out the exams and trying to look through, here's what was tested before, what are the big concepts? Because a final exam is really cumulative mostly, but looking for big ideas. So for my test, when I write my test, I'm not looking for the little things. Those little concepts, I tested those already. I'm looking for, do you understand the discipline of statistics that I'm teaching you? Look through examples, big examples from your notes. All right. How do I prioritize? How do I prioritize? So up here at the top, focus on what you hate first. It's hard. You don't like math. You don't like English. You don't like this class. You might put that to the back burner. Probably the worst thing you can do, because it's going to get the least attention and it probably needs the most attention, because that's why you don't like the class. So study the subjects you don't like or you struggle with first, because you probably need the most work in those. And so if you can force yourself to do that, you will make sure that you are giving that as much time as it is needed. But beyond all of that, what is most important? If you have 4 final exams, how do I do time management? What should I possibly, how do I determine which test I should prepare most for? Number 1, if it's an entrance to major class, that matters, especially if you're trying to go up to University Park for business or engineering, right? If you are taking entrance to major class and you're struggling in that class, or that's, your final will dictate if you're passing or not, you do not want to have to repeat entrance to major, because then you're not going to be able to take the next class in order. So entrance to major, that should be of importance, those classes, right? A gen ed class, if it's not an entrance to major, again, I'm not saying you shouldn't prepare for that exam, but it is not going to hold you back from progressing towards your discipline. Focus on classes that have heavier weighted finals. So my exams in my math class are only worth 15%. If you have a class that has only 3 exams, 2 in a final, and the final's 40% of your overall grade, you probably need to be spending more time in that class. So there is a strategy behind prioritizing. Focus on classes that have higher credits. My Stat 100 class is 4 credits. I say this to students all the time. Most of my students have all 3 credit classes, and they have my class, which is 4 credits. I don't say this because I'm trying to be selfish, but you should probably spend more time studying for my class, because it's going to hurt or help your GPA more. The higher the number of credits, the more it influences your overall GPA. And of course, the more number of credits means the more content that's in that course, which means there's more to prepare. So higher number of credits, weighted, entrance to major, think about all of those things, because yes, you want to do well on all your tests, but at this point, a week out, you need to do some prioritizing. What is on the exam? I just had class today. I have 32, 33 students in 2 of my classes. I gave back my 4th exam, and I spend all class period today talking about what's on the exam a week from now. And there was probably 40% of my class missing in both of those 2 classes. unbelievable. They just missed everything I talked about. Here are the problems that are on the exam. So go to class, go to class, go to class. It's week 15, go to class. The professor is probably talking about the final exam. Complete a review. If there is a course review, the professor, I write a review that I make my students do. Not because I want them to be busy. Those are the things that I'm going to put on the final. So you should be doing that. If I spend the time to create something, it's not to make your life more difficult, it's to help you. All right. So complete your review assignment. Ask questions. Okay. I had 3 people here right before this chat at my office door for my office hours. Hey, you said about this on the exam. Hey, does this need to be on the test? Ask your professor before class, after class. If it's appropriate during class, go to office hours. Learning assistants. I know some of you are in some science and math classes that might have learning assistants. Many of them are the chem classes or whatever. They're doing review sessions. Go to those or come into the learning center. Set up a time in the learning center. If you haven't been in the learning center, sit down for a half hour with a peer tutor, or come in during my open hours and sit there and do work. And then if you have questions, I can help you. So there's a lot of things. You should walk into your final exam knowing already what's on that test. You got to do your homework. And by homework, I mean, you got to go start talking and having conversations. All right. Where and when to study. Hate to break it to you, but if you haven't started studying, you are late. If you haven't started studying for finals, you are already late. Are you too late? Well, I don't know if there's ever a too late, but you are late. You should start studying from final exams, in my opinion, the first time you get the day one, maybe not day one of the semester, but when you get your first exam back, maybe week 3, week 4, that's when you should start studying for finals. And what do I mean by that? I always tell my classes, here's your first exam. I just gave it back to you. Don't put it in your book bag and don't look at it until finals. Take it and get the answers corrected, because 12 weeks from now, you're going to have a final and you need to know this information. If you haven't corrected your 3 or 4 exams that you've had in your classes, you go to pull them out this week or this weekend, and you had, say, a 70% on the exam, you are now going to try to study something that's 70% correct. Even if you do 90% of that, you're still going to get a 60-some% on your test. So hopefully you have corrected your exams. If not, that's what you should be doing this week. All right. But you should already be preparing for final exams. Start organizing, studying early. Preparation for finals exams begins before the week of final exams. So think of finals week as finals weeks, right? After, Thanksgiving break and on, it's crunch time. This is showtime. Finals weeks. You have these couple weeks to get prepared for these high stake tests. And you will not be able to cram an entire semester's worth of information into 1 or 2 nights. It just will not happen. It will not end very well at all. Get started now if you haven't, organizing, getting your notes put together so that if you are taking Thursday or Friday or Saturday or Sunday to spend the whole day studying, you don't have to put stuff together to study. You already have it there. So take a night this week to get your things organized. At a comfortable place to work. Campus is open. Study in chunks. So do not sit down and try to study 7 hours in a row. So Sonia, the director of the Learning Center, likes to say the 25-5 rule, or 25 minutes of distraction free. What that means is right here, put your phone away, leave it in another room, right? Put it away. Don't go on social media. Take 25 minutes and then take a 5-minute break. Go back. And if you do a model like that, you're not going to get burnt out. So it's important to think about the way that you're studying. No phone, no friends, no fun for those 25 minutes. Learn to say no. I don't know. I know we might be a little bit late in doing this LionSide Chat because it's only a week away. But if you have a job that you're working 25 hours a week, I'm hoping you asked off, or if not, hopefully you can try to find somebody to cover some of your shifts. If you are working 25 hours a week or 30 hours a week in a part-time job and you're doing that this week and this weekend, you're going to run into not a whole lot of time to prepare for these high stake tests. Okay, so don't overcommit yourself during finals week. The truth about all-nighters only allows you to function at 50 to 70% of your capability. Literally, there's lots of research on this. It can set you up for panic, blanking, misreading test questions. I like that one meme here. It's literally, if you pull an all-nighter and go to take a test, it's like you're taking the exam legally drunk, right? Your brain cannot handle not having any rest. You might think so, but you will only do 50 to 70% of your capability. So sleep, health, way more important than all-nighters. And actually, I think we're going to talk a little bit about that here in just a minute or two. So a couple more things, and then we'll see if you have any questions. During the exam, you get the exam, preview it, okay? Real briefly, look at it, look at the layout. Are you, do you have to, do free response questions? Are there multiple choice first? So that you can put together your plan, demonstrate the knowledge of your big ideas. So if you don't know some topic, don't just draw me a pretty little picture. Give me the knowledge of your big idea. I'm looking for you to explain to me that you understand my course and my discipline. So even if you're not so sure about a specific thing, don't leave it blank and don't write anything about the topic. Give me your knowledge about the topic, even if it doesn't 100% agree with, the question that's being asked. I'm looking for big ideas. Don't leave anything blank. Check your work only if time allows. You don't want to be double checking your work and then run out of time. And this is probably a big one, for the entire exam. Multiple reasons, okay? I write my exam, as I think most professors do, to be an hour and 50 minutes, okay? I'm not saying you take your test an hour and 40 minutes and you're done, and you turn it in 10 minutes to go and you walk out of the room. I'm okay with that. But I can't tell you how many students will come into the final exam and 15 minutes into the test, they'll bring my test up, give it to me, and walk out the door. That kind of puts, that's telling me, hey, I don't care about your test, right? Maybe you don't know what you're doing or whatnot, but you don't want to single yourself out in terms of, turning a test in 10 minutes late or 10 minutes into the test and not spending the entire time actually putting the effort in. And then that's about sort of what I have here. I just want to emphasize, this is not a spectator sport, all right? You can't just expect that you're going to do well because you're going to sit back and not actually prepare. So it's showtime, it's crunch time, whatever you want to call it, but you can't just sit back. So it's time to play ball. What do you think about that, Don? Got my baseball reference in there.
Any baseball reference is good for me, and any show reference. So those are my two.
So I mean, there's a lot there, folks. I'm just trying to get you a little bit more comfortable, especially if you've never taken these high stakes final exams before.
My family group chat, I don't know if you all have one of those, but I have two college kids at Penn State. And today my son, as he was walking to his first class of the day, sent a note in the family group chat and said, it's the home stretch. And that's exactly what it is. This is the home stretch of the race. It's the time of the semester where you're going to be busy. It's a lot going on, and using the tips that Dr. Hassler presented today, there's some really good stuff there. He had way too much math for my brain, but that's okay.
But you can apply those topics in other disciplines. Right?
And I appreciated that, because that's a question that as a mom I answer a lot. What am I going to use this? So I will be referencing The Price is Right often when that question comes up in the house.
There you go.
So so those of you that are with us, questions, put in the Q&A pod, and we're happy to answer those, even if it may not be directly relevant to Ryan's comments today. Ryan and I are a wealth of information. We want to be able to help you set yourselves up for success. So are there any questions that we can answer? Ryan, talk to me a little bit about that concept of using the entire hour and 50 minutes like that. I think that is so important. And I want to reiterate that. I mean, I know you've already discussed it, but a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say this is for every instructor, right? Every faculty member. But I try to do somewhat of a holistic grading. If you are coming to my class and I know who you are. I had a student show up to my fourth exam this week, and I looked at him and said, who are you? He hadn't been here since the second week of the semester, right? So if you are coming to my class and you are putting the effort in and you are staying for the entire exam, at the end of the semester, you end with an 80 or a 79.4. I don't have to give you a B-, but chances are I know who you are. I saw you put the effort in. You didn't just leave stuff blank and wait 10 minutes and leave. So, I mean, it's more of a maybe respect, professional, right, type of idea. You wouldn't walk into a meeting with your boss and 10 minutes into the meeting walk out because you don't feel like you can contribute anything to the conversation, right? So it's more of getting yourself, folks, in that mindset that this is it. This is where I'm at. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to spend my time doing this and show here is my performance. I, as a personally, if somebody gives me that 10 minutes in, I view that as them giving up and not putting that effort in. I don't know, Don, if that's
No,
what
I agree. I don't do a final exam here, but I've given final exams in the past. And to me, there's so much value in just at least trying, looking through all of them. Maybe there's a pleasant surprise that there's something within the test, 1 or 2 or 3 questions that you can go through and at least make an effort on. And I really think that there's a lot of value in that. And I think that, you know, to tie this into our common read, I think there's a lot of grit that you can show by, you know, at least giving it an attempt. So I appreciate that. So we do have a question, not directly related to Ryan's comments, but one that I can very easily answer. This is, how do we prove that we were here for the passport event? So thank you for that question. The passport, people that are monitoring the passport stuff for the FYS have access to a folder that Ryan actually puts the list of attendees, that folks that come and stay for the entire duration of the LionSide Chat. There is a report that we get to generate, and FYS instructors and those that are approving the passports can see those names. So that's how you can just write down that you attended the LionSide Chat, and instead of having a sticker or a stamp, they'll double check that.
Yeah, they can verify it. Yeah.
What other questions can we answer for you? Go ahead and throw them into the Q&A feature here. Ryan, I don't think I did. My phone rang like right in the middle, so I might have missed this.
You're good.
Like that college kid again. My question to you, and I don't know if you addressed this specifically, but I think something that's important is also that we want to manage our health and how we're eating and hydrating and trying to get some exercise. I think there's some value in talking a little bit about that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mentioned, you know, the all-nighters, right? And,
right, yes.
And making sure that you actually get sleep. But yeah, it all has to do with everything, you know, it has to do with your health, your exercise. So, I mean, my suggestion is you don't change anything that you typically would, right? So don't not exercise, but don't start running a 5K the week of finals, right? So hopefully you're making some healthy choices right now in terms of mental health and physical health and whatnot. But I would say during this time, the thing I would probably suggest is that sleep, right? The sleep is way more vital than what you think. So yes, there's a lot to do. Yes, there's a lot, but if you are not having the proper sleep, it doesn't matter how much time you're putting in. So that's kind of like a lose-lose situation. If you're staying up all night and not putting in, you know, or you're putting in too much time, so you can overstudy, right? So that would be my suggestion. I don't know. Do you have suggestions for during, you know, stressful times?
Yeah, no, and I'll offer a couple of my things, but before I do that, if you have questions in our audience, please feel free to ask them. We want to answer them for you. I agree with you not to change anything that you're doing, and that's assuming that you're making good choices now. I think it's really super important to eat healthy than you typically do. You know, what you put into your body is the fuel that makes it run efficiently. You know, and you definitely want to stay hydrated. And even though caffeine and finals week are sort of synonymous with each other, I do encourage you to watch that intake. You know, it can be a disaster if you have too much caffeine. It just does not help you at all. So I think that's really important to stay focused on that.
Yeah, and I mentioned the don't overcommit, right? So learn to say no. If your boss says, oh, I need somebody to come work on Thursday, but you have a test on Friday. I mean, don't overcommit. And, you know, maybe some of that stuff's a little bit too late. You're hearing that now, but for next semester, you know, for finals week, starting in January, tell your boss, hey, I need this week off, or I need these less hours, because those extra things, even your parents, right? Your parents or family or friends, they're going to be super happy, excited for you to come home, right? but there were times in college where I say, hey, mom and dad, I really can't talk. I can't deal with thinking about that now. I have to prioritize this in order so that I can get to this point. So you could have pressures from family or from work that you need to prioritize the education because it's crunch time.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the college kid that just called. She's coming home on the weekend. All of her finals are virtual, so she can come home a week early, which is really nice. And I'm excited for that. But I said to her, I need to know what your schedule is because I know you still have stuff to do, and I don't want you to sort of be reintroduced into the family structure and have expectations as part of our household if you're still in the middle of finals. So we did have that conversation. You know, I'm sure that many of you that are listening don't have a college professor as a parent that would maybe make that observation on their own. So make sure you manage that with your families. Another thing that I'd like to stress, and please feel free to ask your questions. We'll keep the chat open or the Q&A open for another couple of minutes here. But I really want to stress that 25-20, the Pomodoro method that Sonia talks about when she meets with students. That is such a valuable tool, and it really works across all classes that you're working on. You know, working in chunks is such a better way for our brains to absorb the chunks and the repetition and going over stuff as opposed to those marathon 6, 7, 8 hour study sessions. They are not useful. They are not effective at all. So I highly recommend, you know, using that and even take some time this week before you get into finals and sort of maybe even plan out your week. Coming up from the weekend all the way through your finals next week. I think there is definitely some value in that. So think through that a little bit.
Yeah, your schedule for next week is probably going to be different for lots of reasons. And so you need to make sure you plan that out on paper. Because the tests are different times, your classes are different. You don't have classes, right? But you have tests different times. So you definitely, you need to make sure that you have everything put into plate or have it on paper so that you can see what is different because you've just done 15 weeks. Well, I mean, Thanksgiving week maybe was a little bit different, but you've done 15 weeks of the same thing and now there's something different. So you just need to make sure you're expecting that.
Yeah, and that is really important. And I know some of your earlier comments in our discussion today were about looking at your schedule on LionPath and really making sure that you are negotiating any conflicts now. I mean, that should be happening. So really, that should be what you be doing today as soon as possible, making sure you know if there are any conflicts and dealing with those, letting your faculty know, and just really setting up your schedule. I think that's important. Are there any last minute questions that we can answer before we sign off here today?
I just wanted to also mention, because I mentioned about the Learning Center, but the Learning Center is open this week yet, but there are no Learning Center hours support tutors next week. The tutors in the Learning Center have their own finals, so we do not make them work to help you when they're working on their own finals. So this is the last week for support from the Learning Center, of course, until the first week starts in the spring semester.
That's good to know. Thank you for reminding us of that. So I want to say thank you to Dr. Ryan Hessler for presenting the We Are Prepared session today. This closes our We Are series for first year seminar this fall semester, and we are grateful to all of you that have attended and made the time to learn all the important information that we do share. All of these sessions, all these LionSide chats are available on our archives page. There is so much information on there, and I highly recommend you take an opportunity to just learn as much as you can from our archives. So it has been a great chat, and I am really grateful to Ryan for his expertise in presenting. As you are clicking out of our session today, you're going to be receiving access to a survey. Please take a few minutes and provide us some feedback about the session, and you're always welcome to reach out through email and let us know what you might be interested in, and keeping eyes peeled for any chats that are coming up in our future. Our next and our final chat of the fall semester will be 1 week from Wednesday at 12 noon. It will be a chat with our new Associate Dean, Dr. Todd Malaccio. I was messing up my names there as I was practicing. Our Associate Dean will be chatting with us about his first semester at Penn State Berks. So be sure to come back and meet with any other faculty, staff, and students about our exciting majors, experiences, and everything that goes on here at the Penn State Berks campus. So stay safe, Berks and beyond. Signing off until next time, this has been Penn State Berks LionSide Chats. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ryan.
Yep.
I'll
Thank
see you.
you. See ya.